Hello there, and welcome to the weekly Outside Views report on European politics. The ex-Soviet Republic of Belarus is expanding the use of the death penalty in its already strict criminal law. Civil servants and military personnel can in future be sentenced to death in cases of state treason. This was decided by the parliament in Minsk in the final reading of the law, as the state news agency Belta reported on Tuesday. Belarus, ruled with an iron fist by ruler Alexander Lukashenko, is the last country in Europe where the death penalty is still carried out. Last year, the country extended the death penalty to the preparation of acts of terrorism under sharp international criticism. This was directed against acts of sabotage on the railway, with which Belarusian activists tried to stop the attack by Russian troops on Ukraine. Lukashenko has made his country available to Moscow as a base of operations in the war against Ukraine. Joint troops are also being formed with Russia. So far, however, Belarus has not actively intervened in the war. However, another tightening of criminal law is also related to the war. In the future, the offense of defaming the Republic of Belarus will also include allegedly disparaging statements about the military, so similar to those in Russia. Thousands of people have been imprisoned in Belarus for political reasons since Lukashenko suppressed a popular movement against his remaining in office in autumn 2020. In the dispute over Sweden and Finland's admission to NATO, both countries have resumed talks with Turkey. After a week-long break, negotiators from the three countries met again in Brussels for the first time on Thursday, as confirmed by NATO circles. NATO Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg also attended the meeting. All currently 30 members of the Western Defense Alliance must agree to the so-called Northern Expansion. In the meantime, only the yes from Turkey and Hungary is missing. After decades of neutrality, Sweden and Finland applied for admission in May last year, following the Russian invasion of Ukraine. Turkey is blocking the admission of the two countries. Sweden accuses them of taking insufficient Sweden of taking insufficient action against terrorist organizations, and Ankara is primarily concerned with the banned Kurdish Workers' Party PKK. An early yes is expected from Hungary, though. In order to solve the blockade, there were several talks between the three countries. However, Turkey suspended them after Islamophobic actions in Stockholm in January. The resumption of talks was already seen as a success in the northern European countries, but a quick breakthrough was not expected. According to the Lithuanian secret services, Russia is able to continue its war of aggression in Ukraine for another 2 years. We estimate that the resources available to Russia today would be sufficient to fight a war with the same intensity as today for 2 more years, said Colonel Elegius Paulavicius of the Baltic EU NATO countries' military intelligence service on Thursday at the presentation of his authority's annual report. Russian troops invaded neighboring Ukraine on February 24th in 2022. Thousands of soldiers from both sides have been killed in the war so far, and according to the UN, more than 8,000 civilians. Russia is becoming increasingly totalitarian under President Vladimir Putin, the report said. However, the war in Ukraine is undermining the political and economic foundations of the regime. The failures on the battlefield, further mobilizations, and a deterioration in the economic situation could have negative consequences for its stability. According to the UN Drug Control Council, the planned legalization of cannabis in Germany harbors the risk of increasing consumption among young people and a growing black market for this drug. The body that monitors compliance with the international drug conventions also pointed out in its annual report on Thursday that the legalization of recreational cannabis was incompatible with these conventions. Only medical and scientific use is permitted. In their coalition agreement, the Social Democrats, the Greens and the Liberals had agreed to make it possible for the drug to be sold in licensed shops to adults for consumption purposes. Cannabis should be grown and sold under state regulations. Growing a few plants yourself should also be allowed. The coalition argues that this serves to protect youth and health because the quality of cannabis is monitored and the dangers of overdoses are reduced. In addition, the black market and crime are to be curbed. After widespread protests, Georgia in the South Caucasus withdrew a controversial bill introducing a register for foreign agents. This was announced by the ruling party Georgian Dream on Thursday in the capital, Tbilisi. The anti-government protests continue. Thousands of people flocked to another demonstration in the capital, Tbilisi, on Thursday. The flags of Georgia, Ukraine, and the European Union were waved in the crowd. The opposition had called for the protests to continue as long as there were no guarantees for a pro-Western cause in the country. The draft on foreign agents withdrawn by the ruling party on Thursday resembled a law in Russia. It has been used by the authorities there for more than 10 years to take action against critics. Critics have accused the Georgian government of paving the way for an authoritarian orientation in the country. They also saw the EU prospects of the former Soviet Republic in danger. And of course, there was also international criticism. Several thousand people had already gathered on the streets of Tbilisi in the past few days for the anti-government and pro-European protests. The police repeatedly used violence against them, using tear gas and water cannons. There were also arrests. Latvia's Prime Minister Krišjānis Kariņš has spoken out in favor of supplying fighter jets to Ukraine, which has been attacked by Russia. I don't see why the West shouldn't deliver fighter jets. If the Ukrainians need fighter jets, they should get them, is what Kariņš said in an interview with the German magazine Spiegel. The delivery of combat aircraft is only a matter of time, says the Prime Minister. According to British military experts, bottlenecks in weapons and ammunition on the Russian side are now having bizarre consequences in the Ukraine war. In the Daily Short report, the British Ministry of Defense wrote on Sunday that Moscow was probably using ordinary field spades in close combat. The background is statements by Russian reservists who are said to have stated that they were only sent with guns and shovels to attack a concrete Ukrainian base. According to the British, the MPL-50 type field spade, actually an entrenchment tool, which is commonly used by the Russian armed forces, is a myth that elevates it to a deadly weapon. It has hardly been further developed since its introduction in 1869. Combat use is a sign of brutal and low-tech hand-to-hand combat, which recent indications indicate are becoming more common in Ukraine. The reasons is likely that Russia wants to continue to carry out attacks despite a lack of ammunition. French President Emmanuel Macron wants to enshrine women's right to abortion in the French constitution and make it irreversible. A corresponding amendment to the constitution should be initiated in the coming months, as Macron said on International Women's Day in Paris on Wednesday. The National Assembly and the Senate had previously backed the project to amend the constitution. Macron's announcement is now accelerating the process. Abortion was legalized in France in 1975. The move to enshrine the right to abortion in the Constitution follows the tightening of abortion laws in the United States. The EU Parliament therefore also wants to include the right to abortion in the Charter of Fundamental Rights of the European Union. According to German Federal Defense Minister Boris Pistorius, the main battle tanks promised by Germany and Portugal for Ukraine will be delivered by the end of March. The tanks would come into the country with trained crews and could then go to the what's called theater of operations. The delivery of Leopard 2 main battle tanks is part of German military aid to help Ukraine defend itself against Russia. On January 25th, the federal government announced the goal of rapidly assembling 2 tank battalions with Leopard 2 tanks for Ukraine. In Ukraine, these are usually equipped with 31 tanks each. In addition to Germany and Portugal, countries such as Poland, Norway, Canada, and Spain are also involved in the initiative. Poland delivered the first 4 Leopard 2 Type 2A4 main battle tanks to Ukraine in February. 10 more are to follow this week. And this concludes this week's report on European politics, but the next one is right here in the end screen. I'll see you there. I'll be back.